Last fall, I quit my day job and started building Squonk Bike Park full-time. I bought the land a few years ago and have been slowly adding trails to it, but last fall I was looking for a change in work. I've run my own software business for nearly a decade now, and it was starting to take its toll on me. I was burning out and I needed some sort of change. While I was considering options, I knew that I had enough money that I could go well over a year without taking any sort of new work, and I decided that this was probably the best time to go all in on the bike park and see if I could make it a reality. I'm planning on opening the park next year, but I'm documenting the process so that everybody can follow along and see what's going on. A lot has changed since my last video. I built my first jump line and broke ground on a second blue jump line. Phil Metz came down and helped to build parts of the bike park, and I even got a bigger excavator so we can build much bigger features. Wet, freezing weather really prevented us from finishing a lot of projects, so I've got a lot of half-finished projects going on around the park. Rather than trying to hide those all while I'm releasing new content, I figured it'd be better to just do a recap of everything we got done in the winter. That way, if they do pop up in the background, you'll understand that they're half-complete projects that we're going to get to later this summer. One of the first projects I tackled last fall was a jump line. I plan to release a future video about learning to build jumps, and I'll take a closer look at the build process there, but for now the quick version is that I repurposed the bottom of an existing trail to build a series of 5 jumps that we could session. Not only is this a fun way to warm up, but it also gives me a way to quickly evaluate new riders before showing them around the park. That way I know if I need to point out certain features to them or if they're going to be fine with them. A few parts of the jump line need to be tweaked, but it was a good learning experience to see what was possible with the small excavator. Shortly after announcing that I was working on the park full time, Phil Metz reached out and offered to help with some of the trail builds. For those of you who don't know him, Phil runs the YouTube channel Skills with Phil. On it, he rides various bike parks and is generally just a very good rider. He has a background racing BMX and downhill, and he also has experience building some pretty wild trails up in Vermont. So all in all, he's a great person to have helping out with some of the trails. I met Phil virtually back when GT announced that they were shutting down. I had sent him an email basically saying, hey, it sucks that you lost your sponsor. I'm trying to build a bike park. If that's something you have any interest in getting involved with, let me know. We talked a few times over video chat, and then when he was doing his I Hate Pedaling tour, he decided to stop by and check out the park. Phil and I talked a few more times after his visit, but it didn't really make sense to move forward with anything then. He had a few projects going on, I was still working on this part-time, so it just didn't line up. And then fast forward to this fall, when I decided to do this full-time, and all of a sudden it made a little bit more sense for both of us. The initial plan was for Phil to come for about a month or so, and we would do a mix of hand-built and machine-built trails. The main goal was just really to see how we work together and also just to let Phil get a sense of the terrain since he really hadn't got to walk the entire property the first time he came. While planning for Phil's visit, we talked about different machine options, and ultimately my concern was that I only had him for a month and I didn't want to be in a position where we didn't get nearly as much done because we didn't have 2 machines. We talked about different options such as renting a machine or even hauling his machine down, but ultimately what I decided to do was to buy this Cat 305. I'd been contemplating a bigger machine prior to talking with Phil, so really this ended up just speeding up that process. I knew I was going to need something bigger to build really big jumps, and I had tried to build jumps with a smaller machine, and it's just really limiting in a lot of ways. I spoke with a bunch of different trail builders, and the general consensus was that you kind of need something between a Cat 303.5 and a Cat 305 to build bike park style jumps. You can use something bigger, but it's a little bit harder to maneuver through the woods, and something smaller is just going to take you a lot more time to stack all the dirt and get everything set up. I was originally planning to wait until later this year to buy a bigger machine. The Kubota U17 I've been using is a much smaller machine than a Cat 305, and it requires very different trail building techniques. But with Phil coming and Cat offering 0% interest, I decided that it was probably better just to go ahead and pull the trigger, knowing that I was going to get the machine eventually, and it would be nice to have the option in case he and I wanted to get into some bigger projects. Weirdly enough, the timing for this kind of worked out perfectly. Phil showed up, got unpacked, and got settled in, and then I think the very next day, I found out that the new machine was going to be showing up. So that gave us enough time in the morning to come out to the property, look around, check everything out, and then that afternoon we had a new excavator showing up. This was really nice because it meant we could both sit there and ask questions of the Cat rep and make sure we understood everything about the machine. I think our original plan was to start with a natural trail, that way Phil could get to know the terrain a little bit better, and we weren't going to be using a machine. But with the new excavator here, we were both kind of like kids in a candy shop, and we were very eager to test it out. So it didn't take long before we were discussing what sort of things we could do with the machine and where we could take it. Before Phil arrived, I had been working on a beginner trail and a beginner skills area. My kids were somewhat impatiently waiting for me to build some trails that they could ride, and I had started clearing out a section so that I could build 4 little jump lines that they could learn with, as well as a beginner trail that fed into them. The goal was also to have some picnic tables and some other stuff there so that my wife and I could hang out while the kids rode, and I figured that whenever the bike park opens, it'll be a great place for people to just talk and hang out. So when Phil asked if I had an open space that he could get used to the bigger machine, this was kind of a no-brainer. It was wide open, so we weren't going to run into trees or anything. We were building jumps, so we'd get a feel for how to actually shape them with the big machine, and it was something that we wanted at the park, so it was going to be helpful all around. Whilst Phil was here, we were able to complete 2 of the 4 jump lines, and we were able to test them, verifying that not only did they work as individual lines, but a better rider can actually transition from one line to another, meaning that we've got an area that riders of all skill levels can have fun with and enjoy. After finishing the 2 jump lines, Phil moved on to working on the beginner trail. This was going to give him some experience using the bigger machine on a mountainside, whereas prior to then he'd been working on a relatively mellow grade and it was a pretty open space. While Phil was working on the beginner trail, I focused on building the climb trail. We both probably finished 15 to 20% of the total trail length, so it's not completely done, but it's a good step in the right direction, especially given how wet things were getting towards the end of his time here. I've been incredibly lucky to have a core group of people that help all the time at the bike park. While Phil was here, we didn't want to have them doing nothing but finish work the entire time. They were willing to do it, but it gets kind of monotonous and boring, so we wanted to have a change of pace. One weekend when we had especially nice weather, we decided to go to the top of the mountain and work on a more advanced natural trail. Natural trails are great when you have a group of experienced riders who have a bit of trail building experience. It allows them to have some ownership of the project because they can decide, hey, where do I want the trail to be off camber? Where do I want it to be benched out? It also allows them to quickly get on a bike and start testing things. With a flow trail or a machine-built trail, it can take a while until a section's ready to ride. But with a more natural trail, it usually only takes a few days until you have rideable sections. In this particular case, I think it took us 3 to 4 days to get pretty much the entire trail done. And while we still need to burn in some lines riding bikes on it, that just means we have to ride the trail. It doesn't mean we have to actually do any more work on it. Near the end of November, winter was setting in and it was getting pretty challenging to build trails. Phil decided to head back north, but hopefully we'll see him down here again sometime this year. I attempted to continue working on the climb trail, but it was an especially cold winter, and despite me wearing many layers, electric gloves, electric socks, pretty much anything you could think of, it was really hard to stay warm while I was in the machine. It didn't help that my excavator I was using at the time was an open cab and it doesn't really have any way to keep yourself warm. Rather than suffering all winter long, I decided to spend some time learning how to run the new excavator. While Phil was here, I maybe got an hour of time using it, so I didn't really have a lot of experience with it, and I knew I'd want to get the hang of it before I took it on a trail. It was definitely annoying working around the bad weather, but luckily we were still able to get most of the shuttle road done, and now things are running smoother than ever. The winter also gave me an opportunity to get to a bunch of small projects that I had been kind of putting off. Things like the side-by-side had a shock that needed replaced, and just other odds and ends that needed to get done, but when there was time and good weather for trail building, I tended to lean towards doing those instead. As I was reaching the steeper part of the road, it was starting to get warmer and drier out, and I was really itching to get some trail building done. I had only had time in the big machine doing road work, and I had been doing random projects around the park all winter long. So I was really eager to work on a trail, and I was especially eager to take the big machine and learn how to build a trail with it, because at this point I had only worked on cleaning up some spots on the road. I hadn't actually done trail work with it. So I decided to break ground on the jump trail. Over the next month, I'll be releasing content and updates about this new jump trail. It's expected to be about a mile long, and it sits just above the shuttle road, so whenever you're going up the shuttle road, you can easily see almost all the features on the trail. If you want to follow along and see how this jump trail progresses, be sure to hit the subscribe button. While you're at it, let us know in the comments your favorite jump trails so we can check them out for inspiration.